Welcome to Sivako, Road to Avatar. My name is Shaun Alexander, and I'll be your guide to the world of Pandora and beyond. To support this show, head on over to www.patreon.com/avatarpod, where you can become a patron and gain access to exclusive content. Joining me today, I have a very special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. I am Derick McDuff, a fellow podcaster and freelance film critic.
It's a pleasure to have you on, Derick. And yeah, it's a very exciting time of the year now we're getting up to, which is going to be our main topic for today. But before that, I will ask you a few little questions to do with the topic of the show, as always, Avatar. So, for yourself, when was the first time you saw Avatar?
The first one, I was actually working in a movie theater. I was in college. I would have been in college at the time. And I saw it a couple times in the theaters. And for the second one, I saw it opening weekend.
Nice, very good. So, do you remember sort of like the craze of it, then working at a theater at the time?
Oh yeah, it was nuts. It was wild, and we were at a relatively small theater, at least for, because I'm Southern California here, and it's not like one of these. Most theaters here are like 20, 30 screens. We were just like a little 6 screen theater, but Avatar still played for like weeks and weeks and weeks. Like it had those crazy legs, and like I think we had it all the way till February or maybe even March, which was unheard of. Like we never had movies more than a month, and yeah, just people kept coming and coming, and there was we had it on. I think at one point when it first opened, we had it on 3 screens, so half of our theater was just devoted solely to Avatar.
It's crazy, honestly. I obviously I've got memories of it, but to me, it still feels unreal to think of how it was so impactful at the time to be like just taking over like screens entirely for literally months on end.
Yeah, yeah, it was just like and especially since other than award stuff, there's nothing else and it's the same thing we're seeing this year again. It's like people aren't it's still doing so well, and because people aren't going to go out and rush to see Plane or Meg 3 and or whatever, so it's really still dominating screens, I feel like.
Hmm. So, have you got a favorite moment from either of the films?
That's a good question. I was thinking about that a little bit, and I think that the moments, I don't know if it's one moment, but it's the arc of when I'm forgive me, I'm spacing on the characters' names, but Jake Sully's son, and I'm gonna maybe mispronounce this, Tulkun the whale. Their kind of like friendship, their bond, especially when they're first meeting, and like he kind of like is talking to him. That he's my favorite character, Tulkun. Like I was just so enamored with that. I thought all of that was really awesome. And then also when he just like pops that Australian dude's arm off, I thought that was incredible. I was just like clapping in the theater. I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah, I remember I just tweeted about it yesterday, being like, because someone was saying, oh, if there was an Oscar cheer moment of the year, that for me that was the moment because I remember as soon as that happened, I knew what was coming, and my body was just like ready to shout out.
Yeah, it was great.
It's like an oddly satisfying thing because it is that revenge, and
Mhm,
yeah, it's crazy to think as well. Like we've grown to love Payakan, the Tolkien, and
mhm.
and yeah, but he's only given dialogue through through words on the screen, but he feels as fleshed out of a character as a lot of the other ones do in the film.
Yeah, and I think that's a real strength of specifically the sequel, is that the characters in this one feel just really deep and interesting, and I got to give a lot of credit to, and I'm sure you've talked about this, but Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver, who were, of course, anybody who's not aware, they were the writers who were brought on to kind of touch up the film a little bit. That is one thing I don't want to criticize Avatar 1 too much, but I think that was one thing that was maybe lacking from the first one is the characters felt a little a little more archetypal. But in this one, I really connected to a lot of the characters to the point where, yeah, there is this whale where you're not really hearing any dialogue or him, but the bond that he forms with this other character is so deep and real. And bringing in those writers who, of course, had worked on the Planet of the Apes trilogy, so they had a lot of experience working in this kind of motion capture medium with these characters that a lot of the apes don't speak a lot. A lot of them use sign language and stuff like that. So I think that was a very, very smart move to have them kind of be the other two heads of, along with James Cameron, in this kind of writers' room for all the sequels.
Yeah, I was so impressed, and you can really tell. You know, I see a like at that through line between those Planet of the Apes films and the latest Avatar. I think it's quite clear to see why they were brought in as well. Like it feels almost like a template of how you can empathize with non-human characters.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because yeah, Caesar is such an interesting character, and a big part of that is just Andy Serkis's performance. But they're also really well written characters. Especially since Jaff and Silver worked with different directors. They worked with Matt Reeves in the sequels. I forget off that. I wish I could remember who did the first one, but yeah, those were characters that were created under one writer, and then they had to redo them under one director and redo them in a completely different director. But there is still this solid arc that Caesar and a lot of the other surrounding characters go through, and as the Apes trilogies go on, the humans go from more sympathetic to, by the end of it, kind of completely unsympathetic for the most part. There's exceptions, but yeah, and the apes just become more and more interesting as it goes along.
Yeah. So we are going to go on to our topic of the day, which is the Oscar nominations, which have just come out, and we're specifically obviously going to focus on Avatar, but we are going to speak about them in a general sense as well. Talk about the exciting ones, maybe from some snubs as well. So to begin with, yeah, Avatar: The Way of Water got 4 nominations. So do you remember exactly which ones it was nominated in?
So let's see. It got Best Picture. It got visual effects, and okay, you might have to help me out with the other two.
I believe it was for best visual effect. Oh, you said visual effects, didn't you? Production design and sound
Okay,
were
yeah,
the
because
other
I have
three
it pulled up in front
categories.
of me. I'm just like scrolling. Okay, yeah, yeah, that all makes sense.
So I think let's start with one of a couple of the smaller categories first. So I think things like best sound, I think it's done really well to get into a category like that because obviously there's actually a lot of music based sort of films this year that have been quite successful. I know it's in the same category as Elvis, and I
Hmm.
know that's the sound on that was fantastic and as well Top Gun Maverick, which I feel like it's competing with almost head to head in a lot of these categories.
I was gonna say any other year, I feel like this like Avatar 2 would just walk away with so many technical awards. But I think Top Gun Maverick is really gonna be, and I think that's also why it maybe didn't get nominated in more technical categories, because this year was really strong for a lot of these big um blockbuster on the big screen films, and which isn't a total coincidence because this is the year when cinemas have quote unquote started to come back, and they have held, like Tom Cruise and whoever else have held these films like Top Gun and in this case Avatar and everything else, because they wanted to get this big theatrical release. So now they're all kind of competing in the same space.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see as well that that sort of discussion of being like, I think this is the year where the nominees for like best picture are like the most successful financially ever, and
Yeah,
obviously that's a
yeah,
big part to do
exactly.
with Avatar and Top Gun being there. You know, that's
Mhm.
that's 3.5 billion in itself.
Right. Yeah. No. Definitely. And yeah, there's even some other ones like I mean, it's a more of a mid budget film, but even like Everything Everywhere All at Once was a huge for its especially for its budget, a huge box office success.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the other categories that Avatar is nominated in is for best production design, and I think this is going to be such an interesting one to see because obviously people associate Avatar with its visuals so much that I think the idea of production design in it almost seems redundant in a way, and obviously it's not. We've seen like behind the scenes videos of how much detail is put into things like their costumes or things that they're interacting with in that space that are then like put into the actual visual effects in the end. And I think, yeah, I feel like it's probably going to get overlooked in that category more than likely because we got things like All Quiet on the Western Front and Elvis and Babylon and The Fablemans, which are obviously very like your prestige drama sort of ones.
Yeah, it's a lot of like, especially with like Babylon, it's like the old Hollywood and All Quiet on Western. Like there are a lot of historical. All the other ones are all historical films. So I think that the Academy does lean a little bit that way. Maybe not as in much as production design as something like makeup, which always kind of those always kind of take the more historical route over something more fantastical. But it's also one of the few categories where it's not nominated alongside Top Gun, and that might help. So yeah, these technical ones are always tough. There's actually no Marvel films or no superhero films at all in this category this year. The Batman's in a lot of these same categories too. So I'm not sure if that gives it a leg up or not on this one.
Yeah, it's hard to say because obviously being the only sort of big blockbuster. I say that Elvis was actually a really huge financial success as well. It
Yeah,
was basically a blockbuster in itself. But yeah, Avatar being the big dog in that sort of category makes it kind of an
yeah.
interesting competition. But I think you're right. The sort of yeah, like the historic dramas that yeah, like things like Babylon offer. And I saw Babylon yesterday, and the production design on it is incredible. So I'm not surprised it got nominated. Honestly,
Yeah, yeah, that's because I love Damien Chazelle, and he is always. I haven't got a chance to see Babylon yet. There's only of the Best Picture ones that and Triangle of Sadness are the only ones I haven't got a chance to see yet. But I mean, he always has such First Man, and even something smaller like Whiplash. He always brings the technical aspects to it, and I think that Hollywood does reward, or the Oscars do reward past success. So I think that might give it another leg up.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, let's look at best visual effects next, which I feel like is gonna be such an interesting one because again, it comes to that competition with Top Gun Maverick. But here we've also got the Batman and Black Panther Wakanda Forever and All Quiet on the Western Front. Now, obviously, Avatar's probably in terms of like what it's doing with its visual effects is doing the most. I don't think that's hard to deny, is it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's very much, especially when you're talking about Top Gun and Avatar. It's very much apples and oranges because they are both incredible visual feats, but done so different. Like Avatar is all about kind of pushing this technology forward, and it's obviously done practically to an extent because they are actually doing all these diving and all that stuff. But it's all mocapped and it's all the worlds are all kind of digitally created. Where Top Gun is all about let's do everything like in camera, like actually have Tom Cruise in a plane and see that and have it like these planes doing these actual aerial stunts. So it is so different that it's really difficult to compare them. And then you've got stuff like Black Panther and the Batman, which are kind of a little bit more in between those two extremes. Like Batman might be a little bit more gritty, but they're like in realistic, but they're still doing a lot of digital stuff, and same with Black Panther. But yeah, it's really tough to just kind of to parse these two styles because I mean I have such respect for both things that both of these films are doing, and they are two of the reasons why theaters are kind of back this year and people wanted to go because I saw both these films in theaters and it was such an experience both times.
Yeah, and to me, I feel like I've this is the first time for a while where I've seen films multiple times in the cinema, and I did it for
Mhm.
Top Gun and I did it for Avatar. And they're both one of those things where I feel like you want to be sat in a cinema immersed into it so deeply that you're only focusing on the film. And I feel like, yeah, they offer that more than any other film has recently.
Yeah, definitely. Like the only other movie that I can think of that came out this year that really had that same big theatrical experience, and unfortunately didn't get to see it in the theater, was RRR. And that's one maybe criticism you could levy against that film, is that the visual effects, while impressive, are not like award quality, whereas these two really are.
Yeah, for sure. RRR is incredible. I would
Yes.
highly recommend it. And I don't know if you caught it on Twitter, but the video had been going round of James Cameron speaking to the director of RRR. So,
No, I didn't catch that.
oh, it's incredible. He's literally, it's like a 3 minute video of James Cameron just gushing about how much he loved the film.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I love when, directors and actors have respect for each other.
Yeah, and I feel like we get a lot of that, especially this award season. I feel like we've got like a lot of fun storylines going on this year, which we'll
Mhm.
come to in a bit. I think there's like some of my favorite sort of storylines going on this year about it.
Yeah, like, little sidebar, there was this, like, there was some kind of thing where, like, it's all the, the actors from all the, it was before this was announced, but, like, all the actors and actresses from all the, like, big stuff who were getting all the nominations, and it was, Brendan, Fraser and, uh Ki Kwan, and they were talking, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he was complimenting him on the whale, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we've known each other because we were in this movie in the '90s called Encino Man." I'm like, "Oh my god, they were in Encino Man together."
Yeah, like I've seen Encino Man,
Yeah,
and I had forgotten, yeah, that they were both in that in a way, and I was like, man, it's so crazy how it circles back around in way unexpected ways.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to get on to the main category, which is Best Picture, and here Avatar is joined by a lot of the films we mentioned already before. So the likes of All Quiet on the Western Front, Elvis, Top Gun Maverick, but also has the likes of The Banshees of Inisherin, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which seems like it's the front runner at this point, I believe, and things like The Fablemans, Tar, Triangle of Sadness, and Women Talking. So what's the sort of like likelihood of something like Avatar winning this category? Because I feel like it's obviously been nominated for Best Picture, but what are the chances looking like for it winning?
Yeah, so this is one where I think that there was basically, and this year, I should mention for anybody who's listening, who is wondering about the awards process this year, because in the past, obviously, for most of the Academy's history, there was 5 Oscar nominees, and then they made the switch to 10. And there was, I think, it was just one year where there was 10 nominees, and then for the past 10 or so years, there was between 5 and 10 nominees. So that's why recently, most years, you would see between like around 7, 8, or 9, not maybe just 8 or 9 nominees. This year, though, they did make that switch back to no, it's a required 10, which I think was a really good thing because it meant that we got to nominate a lot of really great films. Some things that maybe would not have gotten nominated, would not have gotten the attention. Something like A Triangle of Sadness, that people have maybe had on the radar but haven't gotten around to watching yet. But that does also mean that there are a lot of these Best Picture noms that it's kind of a courtesy nom. I think really realistically, it is a 2 or 3 nominee race. And basically, I think, like you said, Everything Everywhere All at Once is probably the front runner. I think that it is razor thin between that and Banshees of Inisherin. And then I think that The Fablemans is in third, right behind them. It's on the podium, but it's not quite there. It might have a shot because I think of the way that the Oscars does this as a ranked voting thing, that it could get a lot of number twos. Like people could kind of split between their number ones between Everything Everywhere and Banshees, and a lot of people put Fablemans at 2, which could kind of put it up to that number 1. And then I think Tar maybe has an outside shot. It could surge late. A lot of critics are really liking Tar, but beyond that, I don't think any of the big like the big budget popcorn movies, aka Top Gun, and specifically what this podcast is talking about, The Way of Water, have really a shot in this category.
Yeah, but in the end, something like a Best Picture nomination is still an incredible achievement. You know, you're saying
Hmm.
this is one of the 10 best films of the year. And there's a lot of films here which have, there's films here that haven't made it into that best picture category, which I think people may be surprised about. Is there any like particular ones that you felt were overlooked for this category?
Well, I mean, it doesn't really match my personal top 10. There's a lot of movies that I had on my top 10 list that would never get nominated. Not because I don't think they weren't respected, but it's just they're not going to get in. Um, Films like the Batman, I was a really big fan of. The Menu, Ambulance, Michael Bay's Ambulance, which is his best film maybe ever. There are some ones that I do think were Nope was always a long shot to get nominated, but there was a little bit of talk about maybe Nope slipping into that, especially since it was 10. But I think the big one, at least for me, that got snubbed here and snubbed across the board, zero nominations for Decision to Leave, which was also in my top 10 movies of the year, and it got blanked. It didn't even get nominated for Best International Film, which I think is a really a shame.
Yeah, I think I remember sort of reading about it and people saying, yeah, that was the biggest sort of upset, especially in the international film category, where it seemed like almost a front runner at times to win it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It was, I was kind of at the end. I was kind of like, okay, they're probably gonna nominate All Quiet on the Western Front into the Best Picture, and I was like, does that mean they don't have two spaces for something international? But I was like, well, like I think there is a growing um appreciation for South Korean films. You had Parasite win a couple years back. You have stuff like Squid Game getting a lot of popularity. Park Chan Wook is a very popular director. He did films like Old Boy, so people do really appreciate his stuff. So it's kind of a shame. Decision to Leave was it's very Hitchcockian. So uh, yeah, I wish more people could have seen this one and it could have been nominated.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have seen something like that. I think,
Hmm.
yeah, especially with the likes of Parasite recently, it's shown that popularity of South Korean cinema is growing, and I think especially over in the States, it's becoming a little bit more mainstream.
Yeah, definitely, it is something that I think, and just like for whatever reason, Korean culture is just really big in the states now. K-pop is such a huge thing over. I don't know how it is over over with you guys, but K-pop is huge here.
Yeah, it is popular here as well.
Okay.
So one category which I think maybe people were the most surprised didn't see a nomination for Avatar in was perhaps Best Director for James Cameron. And this is always a hard one to say. Now,
Mhm.
I've thought about this recently, and I think the fact that it's moved from, a between 5 to 10 film range of Best Picture films to a solid 10 almost makes it harder for that Best Director category because it's always going to be five from from those
Yeah.
films, and it just means five are going to miss out.
Yeah, like usually you can look at best director and be like, okay, this is gonna pretty much tell you what the real, not the quote unquote, the ones with the actual chance of winning best picture are, because they do line up a lot, especially they tend to give the best director winner also the best picture winner quite a bit. Obviously, in this case, 5 for 5, all the directing noms are also best picture noms. I think that there was four of these that were a lock. Banshees with Martin McDonagh, who, by the way, is one of my favorite directors. Then the Daniels for Everything Everywhere. Todd Field for Tar. Like I said, those all we got a lot of love. And then, of course, Steven Spielberg doing The Fablemans, his passion project about his childhood. I think those four you were going to get nominated no matter what. But that did leave, like, okay, people are wondering, what's this last spot going to be? The last 2 years, we've had women directors I think for the first time ever, win Best Director, and that happened twice in a row. So a lot of people, I think, thought that there would be a woman director getting to that fifth spot. Somebody like for Women Talking. Oh my gosh, I'm spacing on her name. Let me Sarah Polly for Women Talking. But yeah, a lot of people did think that James Cameron, James Cameron, especially since he has gotten it so many times before. He is a very much this kind of auteur guy that we are seeing less and less of. I think that the auteurs as like a filmmaker presence is kind of disappearing, and there's maybe two guys. I think maybe just Nolan and Cameron, who are really the only guys who are like directors who can just open a film and you know that it's just going to make just like hundreds of millions of dollars. I know Tenet didn't make that much money, but that was in deep pandemic. But I think really we are losing that kind of guy who is like, here's the guy, he's putting out a movie. This is his vision, because Fablemans did not do very well, and it's not a big popcorn movie like this. So I think people are disappointed that Cameron isn't getting that awards recognition when he is one of the few guys we have left like this.
Yeah, it's definitely like it feels like he's part of that, yeah, old guard in a way
Hmm.
of, you know, I think especially for his 90s work, he feels like he's one of those directors that people still rely on to be like, I could just go see whatever he's made and I know that I'm going to have a solid at least a 7 out of 10 and it's probably going to be a lot higher than that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And I think, yeah, like as we were saying, like best director is just a really hard category nowadays because it is filled with those front runners first and foremost, and then it's always sort of like there's an extra one, like basically an extra gap, and everyone has to compete for it.
Yeah, yeah. There's yeah. A lot of these categories, there's like, okay, we all know the locks, and then like the 4 and the 5 spot, or maybe just like here, what the just the 5 spot. You're not sure what's gonna slip in.
Yeah. Is there any other categories that you felt like Avatar might have had a chance in, but just missed out?
Yeah, like I was saying, I think another year this would have done a lot better. Another year that wasn't so like movies are back, because obviously with 2020 and 2021 we didn't have a lot of these, other than like a couple Marvel things, just these big production design type things, and now they're all they're all kind of like jammed together. So I think if this movie, had come out in a quote unquote normal year, it would have racked up quite a few more uh, nominations. Like it did get some of the more obvious technical awards, but I think that in another year it might have gotten nominated for something like, let me just kind of scroll, something like editing. I think it could have taken home. Editing is always a really weird one, because it ends up going to movies that have noticeable editing, which is not a good thing. But I think that the editing in this movie was really strong, especially considering how well it flowed for a 3+ hour movie. I think you've really got to have some solid editing to have that, and the fact that it kind of got snubbed in that design, in that category, is kind of a shame. I think even something like costume design, I would have liked to have seen it get nominated for, because they are making a completely unique world, and you have the costume design from the first one, but now they're going to a completely new place. They're going to the this coastal area where all of the looks and designs are unique. You also have the costumes for the military, and just the even something like the gas masks. Like all of that stuff is really interesting and unique, and I think it could have grabbed a nomination there too.
Yeah, and I think one other one is talk of like adapted screenplay. Now, obviously, there's a few in there which are sequels. We've got Glass Onion as well as Top Gun Maverick, and it shows that that category is open to having sequels in there. But obviously, this time missed out.
Yeah, interesting. Like I was looking over the screenplay noms, and usually most years I feel like uh the adapted screenplay is the stronger category, and original is kind of the one that's a little bit more up for grabs. But this year I think that it kind of flipped, where a lot of the like all of the three best picture frontrunners, or all four if you count Tar, are in writing, as is Triangle of Sadness. So yeah, it's the same exact list of the best directors. And then yeah, with the adapted, it was a bit of a weaker category. You had, you know, uh, I mean, still movies that I liked a lot, but Glass Onion and Top Gun, and then even something like Living, which is I think a movie that not very many people are even that familiar with. So yeah, like you said, sequels are a little more open. You had Glass Onion with Rick Jaffin and Amanda Silver's screenplay. I think maybe because that's not typically seen as the strength of Avatar, especially the first one. That of its script, that might be why people it didn't get the nomination here. I don't know what you would take out here because I I mean I liked All Quiet on the Western Front, but yeah, it didn't have this. I don't want to say the strength of that was necessarily its screenplay. Women talking is obviously all screenplay because that movie, like it's in the name, it's all just women talking to each other. So I think you got to keep that one. But yeah, Top Gun Maverick didn't have a strong screenplay either. I think so. You could have easily swapped that one out.
There's one other thing I want to discuss, which is obviously we're at a stage now where we're seeing more and more characters and actors taking on these roles, which are uh, based on visual effects, so they are being CGI'd. So, for example, the likes of Zoe Saldana and Sam Worthington, they're playing the character, but they are CGI the entire time.
Hmm.
Now, in previous years, there's always been talk of the likes of Andy Serkis getting nominated. Do you think at any point we will see a character, like an actor, be nominated for a mocap performance?
I think at some point, and I am definitely of that contingency that was really pushing for Andy Serkis to get his nomination, specifically for the Apes movies. I think that his performance as Caesar is incredible, as is of course so many of it, like Kim as Gollum, so good. Um, I think that there was I think that Saldana could have gotten nominated for the first one. I don't think she has as much to do here. Um, Kate Winslet is really incredible in this. So is Cliff Curtis giving these mocap performances. I think that they could have maybe snuck in for a supporting actor. I don't think it's going to happen necessarily soon. But I do think that that is going to be the way that we are going, is where we are going to get these no cap performances, because people do are starting to realize that yeah, these are their actual emotions and performances that are going up on the screen, even if they are digitally painted over. It's still them doing the acting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the behind the scenes footage that we see, where we see how closely the performance matches to what we see on screen, I think that's proving to people that, yeah, this is the actor's performance. Even though there is a layer of CGI over the top, this is them. They fully embodying those characters, and that's who we're seeing on the screen. They are bringing them to life.
Yeah, definitely. And I even want to shout out like Stephen Lang. He is so good in this. Like I think he's phenomenal. And unlike the first one where he is just himself, he is almost entirely, except for one scene, doing mocap. And he's so like that scene where he crushes his own skull. So brilliant and cinematic, and he just plays it so well. I think he's such an interesting, conflicted character, and that's not the type of role that the Academy typically rewards, even in non-mocap performances. But I would really like to see more stuff like that get in.
Mm. So there are some really fun things happening this year in the Oscars in terms of people's stories and how it's all playing out. So is there any particular ones that jump out to you?
I mean, I think the one I am most interested in is probably the race for best actor, and it's really probably going to come down to um, Brendan Fraser and Colin Farrell, who I am a really big fan of both of theirs. No, none of the nominees had been nominated before, neither them nor the other three actors, I believe. So I really, I haven't seen The Whale yet. I would be very happy if Fraser won, but I am kind of pulling for Colin Farrell. He has consistently been one of the best actors in Hollywood. He's been in a film every year since the year 2000, at least one. He was in four absolutely incredible films this year. He gave four very different and very phenomenal performances in After Yang, 13 Lives, The Batman, obviously, and then what he was nominated for. which is the Banshees of Inisherin. So I'm really curious about that. I think that also another acting category that is Best Supporting Actress. Angela Bassett is nominated, and I think she is the front runner for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and that would be, I believe, the first major award for a Marvel movie. They've won some technical things before, I think, but nothing, of the big five. The screenplays, the actors, and director and picture. So it's really really cool to see the recognition for that kind of role be recognized.
Yeah, especially like I am loving this best actor race. I think it is super interesting, and I think you're right. It is very much between Colin Farrell and Brendan Fraser. But I'm every so often I see Austin Butler's sort of name sneak back up, be like, I think he won at the Golden Globes, and
Hmm.
every so often I'm like, man, if he won for Elvis, I wouldn't mind it. Honestly, he's really good.
He is phenomenal. Elvis is a film that I did not enjoy, but I really dug his performance in it. I thought he was really good. He's got that that voice, and he's like he can't. He's like now he's on press tours. He's like I don't even know where I end and it begins. I think it's probably a two-person race, but kind of like the Fablemans being that third contender in Best Picture. He is kind of that third contender here. Also, speaking of which, I also want to say Ana de Armas, who I'm a really big fan of, was in one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I don't usually like to throw movies under the bus, but Blonde is just a movie that fundamentally just really bothered me on a lot of levels. But she was good in it, and she got nominated for that, so good for her. Another good performance in a bad movie.
Yeah, I think that best actress category is really like it's so varied this year as well.
Hmm.
So I think the obvious like race at the moment is Michelle Yeoh for Everything Ever All at Once and Kate Blanchett for Tar. But yeah, like suddenly out of nowhere, and this literally happened in the last like week or two. Um, is Andrea Riseborough got nominated for To Leslie, which I'll be honest, I don't think anyone knows about.
I don't think anyone's seen. Honestly, I think that a lot of Academy voters were like, "Well, all these famous people are tweeting. All her famous friends are tweeting, like to nominate her, so I guess we will." Which it's a shame that Viola got snubbed for it because I think I mean, Woman King. I was more mixed on. I did enjoy it, but Viola Davis is always so good, and she's so good in The Woman King. I yeah, I've seen Andrea Riseborough in Possessor. I thought she was very good in that, so she's obviously a very talented actress. It just kind of it's kind of like nice to see like, oh, this is I know she just gets her famous friends to put the thumb on the scale or whatever, but in this era of like you've got to pay and finance and do all these circuits and put out the ads and the trades. It was more of a grassroots, just like, hey, my famous friends would like me to get nominated. So good for her for that.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to see that it is possible to do it a different way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And yeah, you brought up the best supporting actress category with Angela Bassett, and I think her performance in that is incredible. But I also think all the other nominees in that category are really strong. Oddly enough, I feel like Jamie Lee Curtis is probably the weakest of that category.
Yeah, it's weird because she's really good, but yeah, she's kind of the odd one out.
Yeah, because the others feel like really strong and memorable performances, and hers, yeah, maybe she's getting in because of her name a little bit in terms of yeah,
Mhm.
it's Jamie Lee Curtis. It's nice to be able to like throw her throw her a nomination, be happy for her.
Yeah, and I think I like I said I haven't seen The Whale, but Hong Chow, I think part of the reason she got nominated is because she was not only good in that, but she was so good in The Menu. Like she's incredible in The Menu, but that's not really an Academy Award movie. So like, okay, we'll give her the Oscar for this one. Not saying she's not good in both of them, but I think it's one of those things where it's like, oh well, we'll nominate her for this one because this is more of a prestige kind of movie.
Yeah, I think that does happen a few times in the past as well, where people are like, "Man, they've had a great year, like,
Yeah.
but I can't nominate this one because it doesn't fit the category too well." So we'll throw them like their Oscar prestige type movie role. The other category for me, best supporting actor. I think it's all sewn up at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, this is gonna be I think that yeah, Ki Hu Kwan is really got this one. I mean, the other actors, obviously, you've got the two supporting roles from Banshees. Brian Tyree Henry is kind of a you know kind of was a dark horse showing up, and then Judd Hirsch has that one really memorable scene in the Fablemans. But yeah, he really deserves it. Like he's so good in this, and he's had such a this is obviously it's been covered a lot, but his first film in decades. Despite him actually being in the film industry for that whole time, he just kind of ended up behind the camera. To see his story and just the fact that it is genuinely an incredible performance. Like nobody's ever really deserved it more. I feel like.
I think it's just really before now. I've always thought it was quite an underappreciated performance as well. Like obviously, a lot of the acclaims early on were going for Michelle Yeoh, and it's so nice to see Key get that recognition. And because it's a hard role to play, because he's playing two roles at once, basically.
Yeah, he does he does even more than that because he'll like do these different roles, but then he'll also have like you'll slip into like this other dimension where he has to kind of like emulate In the Mood for Love and the performance from that, and you're like, wow, that's such an iconic performance in that film, and he really does a good job emulating. And then he's kind of like the goofier Wayman, and then he's the more serious Wayman, and he's just really, and it's different characters, but they're all have the same core, and you're like, that is impressive to be able to do that.
Mm. Is there any other films from this award season that have really like stood out to you, or any other nominations along this way?
I think other than I was looking at best animated feature. This is a really interesting category because I think this year was a very strong year for animation. And I'll just go through the nominees real quick. You had Pinocchio, the Del Toro one, the good one, not the Zemeckis monstrosity. Uh, Turning Red, Pixar film that was very good. The Sea Beast, a kind of underseen Netflix film. Puss in Boots, which is kind of just making a lot of money at the box office. And then it was one of my 10 favorite movies. The last one, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Fortunately, since it was such a good year, that means that a few films that I really enjoyed, like Wendell and Wild, Henry Selick's first film in well, it's been actually so yeah since 2009, same gap between Avatar movies, since he made Coraline, his comeback. But yeah, this is a lot of really good movies, so I'm really curious to see what happens in that category.
Yeah, that one's going to be really like competitive because something like Puss in Boots has that sort of benefit of that it is like popular now. Like it is
Hmm.
doing really well. Like it has consistently been hitting above 10 million at the box office each week.
Yeah, yeah, and then another category that just wanted to mention, and one I am rooting for is Fire of Love, which was an absolutely stunning documentary, is nominated for Best Documentary Feature Film. I'm really glad it got the nomination, and I hope it wins. I do think that it is also getting a bump because it's on Disney Plus. I think some of these films that are more available will be getting these bumps. I think that is going to help some of maybe even the Best Picture nominees. You have, Everything Everywhere is on HBO Max, and something like Fablemans isn't streaming anywhere. So I wonder how that's going to affect things because I do think that will make a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's similar. I don't know if it's the same for you in America, but Banshees of Inisherin is available now to stream,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. Same thing here.
it's so good to be able to see some of these films at this point. I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, it all especially for the UK, we get every single Best Picture nominee so late in the game. Sometimes the week after the after the winners announced.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
it's kind of the same thing here. Like I'm gonna probably go see Women Talking this week because um, even being in a market that is close to LA, we still don't. And I do get a lot of things. We're just now getting Women Talking.
Crazy. It's sort of wild. But then you think of something like Avatar only came out in December, and at that point it was getting nominated for things before it had even been released.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, like the logistics of all this stuff. And like I think of something like a film that was also I had it in my top 10 of the year, which was Petite Mama, which is a film that was released in 2021 in France, but we did not get it in America until March of 2022, which is why I included it in my 22 rankings. But it was not even eligible for this year's Oscars. It was eligible for the 2021 Oscars, and it did not get the nomination for Best Foreign Film. So yeah, stuff like that is always really weird too.
So overall, is there? Let's just go on the best picture categories one final time.
Hmm.
What do you think is going to be the winner on the night?
I think it's going to be Banshees. That is what I'm leaning towards. That is my personal favorite of the year. No offense to Avatar 2, but I really really dug Banshees, and I think that it has a lot of steam behind it. Um, I think it is just like I said, that really razor's edge race between everything everywhere. I think it's going to be one of those years like 2017 with La La Land and Moonlight, where we might not know until it's announced, and in that case, we didn't even know until after it was announced. But yeah, it's going to be close. But my pick is the Banshees of Sharon.
Oh, you know what? I'll sit on the everything everywhere all at once side of the fence
All
instead.
right, all right.
'Cause for me, those two are in my top five. They are both incredible films for completely opposite reasons in a way.
Yeah,
But they're just so incredible, and it's so amazing to see so many great films this year get nominated, and yeah, great performances as well. I saw that it was 16 first-time acting nominees, which is an
yeah,
incredible number. So cool
yeah.
to see.
And I will say, it was a really great year for films. Not just because everything was kind of held back and the big budget stuff was, but because I think we're kind of at peak streaming where studios are like still putting a lot of money into streaming that I don't think they will continue to in years future. But you're still getting stuff like, yeah, they're just gonna release a Predator movie straight to Hulu, and they're gonna release like all these Pixar movies straight to Disney Plus. So you are getting the best of both worlds, and that has helped make it such an incredible year. And you said those were in your top five. Honestly, those top two nominees, they're in my top two. Those were my two favorite films of the year. So I'm really happy either way. Even if I'm wrong, I'm like, all right, well, still, one of my two favorite films got nominated or won Best Picture, so I'll be happy as a clam.
Honestly, it does read similar to that year with La La Land and Moonlight. Those were my top two of that year, I believe, and I was happy either way. And all the drama that occurred then, it was
Yeah,
I remember because obviously I'm watching it. It was like 4 a.m. my side by the time that was being announced, and I turned it off as it was announced because I was like, "Oh, all done for the night." And then someone said, "You got to turn it back on because of what
yeah.
happened."
One of the because I was working, I got off and like turned it on as Best Picture was being announced, and I saw it happen. I was like, "This is insanity!" Like this it was so yeah. So yeah, it's always fun when you have a competitive year where you're kind of not sure where it's gonna go.
I feel like we're going to have a bit of a quieter year, I hope, for for everyone involved after last year's controversy.
Yeah, there's no getting it wrong on stage. There's no slaps. There's none of that. So hopefully it's much more low key and even keel this year.
The question is, how likely is it that someone comes dressed out as a Navi, as Ben Stiller did
Oh
back in
God,
2010?
I forgot about that. That was such an iconic moment. Oh my gosh, I love Ben Stiller.
It's one of like the first gifs that I see come up whenever I'm on online. I'll see if I search for Avatar. It's always one of the first gifs.
Oh man, yeah, he's a comic genius. Honestly, I love Ben Stiller.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure having you on to talk all about this. And yeah, where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, thank you. I've had a blast being on. If anybody out there has enjoyed hearing my thoughts here on Avatar and the Oscars and all that, I do a podcast called Underrated. It's also a film podcast where, as you might guess, we talk about underrated films, anything that's under the radar or underappreciated. This last one that we just covered was it's another technical marvel, and it was actually an unfinished film. Richard Williams' The Thief and the Cobbler. We kind of break that down and talk about how it eventually did get released and how it was edited. But that was a lot of fun. So you can anywhere you listen to podcasts, check out Underrated. Look up Undercast Company. That's the name of the kind of collective of me and my friends that we release podcasts under. or you can find me just on places like Medium by looking up Derek McDuff, and Instagram, all those places.
Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you all for listening. Hope you have a lovely time. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. This week's episode is dedicated to our patrons Eric Scrock and Patrick Regal. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/avatarpod.